All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is Tuesday, January 2nd of 2024. Here is actually our first show of 2024. So welcome, everybody. Appreciate you guys tuning in and supporting our show here. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS-related questions. You get your questions in one of three ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord and want to get access to that channel, there's a link in the description of this video. You also get access to our similar channels, individual sport channels, and you get access to the rest of the SaberSim team here, aside from myself. So can't say enough good things about the Discord. It is our first show of the week, so normally at this point, we would announce the winners for our weekly max challenge, which I actually said we were going to do, so I apologize. We're actually going to put that on hold. Some people were letting me know that their names weren't on the list. Usually DraftKings opens up like a number of different mini maxes. So I think we missed at least one here. So just to make sure that we get everybody and we do our due diligence on our end, I'm going to push the announcement at least until tomorrow here while we get that all sorted out. So appreciate you guys understanding. But with that said, we're going to get the app pulled up here and we're going to get started on questions. Looking ahead, it looks like we have a 6-game NBA slate today, as well as a 13-game NHL slate. So it should be a fun day of DFS overall here. And we have questions in the YouTube chat, questions in the Discord. We're going to start with the questions that came in the Discord as always here. Looks like our first question here is from Greyhawk. Excuse me. Question says, how would I go about setting a rule in NBA that I only want X amount of players with sub 10% ownership in a lineup? For example, I only want one person per lineup with less than 10% ownership. Yeah, good question. So what I would do, I would go to my lineup rules under settings. I would go to add new rule. I would go to group. I would go to automatic. I would say use no more than one player. I would leave group by unchecked. And then I would go down to this requirements option. So click add requirement, go to my own, less than 10%. So now what you're saying is you're telling the builder, hey, do not use more than one player that is less than 10% owned per lineup here. And then you can actually see what effect this has by saving it as a manual rule. It'll create one rule here. I can open it. And then basically what it did is it went and grabbed every single player that is less than 10% owned and then put them in a group. So instead of you manually having to click in 179 players, it automatically goes and grabs all 179 players that have a projected ownership less than 10%, puts them in a big group, and then says only use one. So important though, if you do save as manual, if ownership changes, it will not update unless you click this little refresh icon. So that's why it's good to save it as an auto rule, because when ownership does update, it will automatically change your group if players move up or down the threshold that you've set. All right. 12-pack abs said, to what extent will the Week 18 NFL projections take into account the team motivation and contract incentives? Good question. So I would actually say that, contract incentives specifically, we're going to have nothing at all. Like if that is something you are paying attention to, you are aware of, I would account for that in the projections, because projections are not going to account for contract incentives. As far as team motivation, we do try to capture some of that. Week 18 is like such a weird week for NFL, where I personally think, there is a very good opportunity to have a hand in the dirt approach and manually make adjustments to projections this week of all weeks, right? SaberSim is great, but SaberSim is looking at historical data and is not going to take into account all of the different narratives and motivations and all these things going on. So it can't listen to interviews. It can't quantify coach speak. So those are all opportunities for you to get involved in the process and make some of those adjustments. But if we get reports of like, hey, so-and-so is only going to play, the first half and then probably sit the second half. Like we are going to try and account for some of that more concrete news as much as possible. But anything that is, you know, uh, I don't know what's opposite of concrete, like flexible, anything that's kind of wishy-washy, up in the air. It's like a yes or no. We're actually not going to do that. And the reason for that is like, say there's reports like, oh, you know, QB1 is going to start, and then we'll see how the game goes. Like if a coach says something like that, we're never going to project the backup in that position because we don't want people to end up with lineups with the backup and then he never ends up playing. But if like you have this like strong inclination, like okay, that means that the quarterback is going to play, the first drive, the first quarter, and then they're going to switch. And if you want to manually tweak projections, I would do that. It's just like we're not going to act without a more concrete statement or news from some credible source is basically what I'm getting at. All right. Question from Hammer. Question says, with the PGA season kicking off on Thursday, what's the best approach and overall strategy using SaberSim? Great question. Yeah, I actually didn't mention that PGA is returning on Thursday here, so it should be a fun start to the season. I do know that we are going to have a video coming out before tee off on Thursday morning here. So be on the lookout for that. I don't want to spoil anything on the way there, but we will make sure everybody knows about a golf video that comes out. All right. Looks like Sean jumped in and helped out. Greyhawk. Appreciate you, Sean. Next question here. Question says, what is the best sim setup for contests that are less than 20 max and more than single entry for FanDuel? Example, they have an 8 max, 11 max. Yeah, good question. What I would do, honestly, is just always lean on the higher side. So, like, we have, single entry, 3 max, 20 max, 150. If your contest falls somewhere in between any of those levels, I would just always lean on the higher side. So one thing that you'll notice is that, say you're playing a 3 max 100 to 1K entries. If you switch it to 20 max, the sliders will either one be the same or two slightly move, depending on the size here. So like going from 3 max 1 to 10K entries goes from 0.7 at 3 max to 1.7 at 20 max. So anytime the sliders go up, you are creating lineups that have higher upside here. Taking smaller groups of sims, counting for correlation more, basically anything to achieve like a higher score in those contests. So leaning on the higher side there's never anything wrong. If you lean on the low side, you might not create lineups with enough upside to win your contest. So a little bit of overkill in that situation is okay. So I would just lean on the higher side. All right. Question from Ryan. Question says, good day, Andrew. Can you go over how you would spread out $125 of play on DK over the 6 different NBA slates, main turbo night showdowns tonight? Yeah, I mean, honestly, what I would do is I think it's very easy to get down $125 of action on a single slate rather than across multiple slates here. So I do like the idea of spreading out across multiple slates, but that's typically once you've played all the contests under $3 on the main slate, right? So if you go to DraftKings, you're going to see you have like a main, a turbo, a night, 3 showdowns. I think these are all good slates, and I think that you could play all of them. But if you only have $125, like if I'm playing the main slate, right? So I can just like do this from SaberSim, sort by entry fees low to high. So like play your dime times, play your quarter jukebox. You could play, if you wanted, you could play, a less than the max in the 2 mini maxes, right? Maybe you want to get access to both contests. So instead of playing, instead of maxing out one, maybe you put 75 lineups in one, 75 lineups in the other. That way you have the opportunity to win first place in both of them rather than just one of them here, right? And then, you still have your $1 single entry, your $1 20 max. You still have a $2 150 max, right? So like there are so many ways to get in your lineups, to get $125 of action down on the main slate alone, that I would just probably focus on that. That way you can like really focus on those lineups. And then basically like kind of once you max all these out, right? Like once you play all the mini maxes and the $2 mini max and, you know, the 50 cent and all those, and you still have bankroll left, then at that point, it's like, okay, let's go to the turbo. Okay, let's go to the night. You know, if you want to focus on classics as opposed to showdown, maybe your classic process is better. Then maybe you branch out to FanDuel, right? Like, hey, go to FanDuel. Hey, go to Owner's Box. Hey, go to Yahoo. Okay, hey, like, you know, like let's maybe now we dabble in some showdowns. Like as you build your bankroll, you spread out as opposed to more and more slates, more and more sites, as opposed to scaling up and down the contest lobby, going over that $3 threshold, and then going and playing, you know, the highest dollar contests in the lobby, just because you don't want to go spread out, right? So that's my advice. All right, question from Sammy. Good afternoon, Andrew. For NFL, what is the best way to force certain teams that I like, not as main stacks, but as secondary stacks? Thanks. Oh man, that's tough. My initial thought is that if you know you don't really care for them as primary stacks, then just remove their quarterback and, you know, build lineups that way. Like if I were here, right, maybe I use like a rule. So what I could say is, you know, use at least 2 group by team, uncheck the quarterback, and then leave running back, wide receiver, tight end. Another thing I could do is say, you know, use at least 1 per team here. Like say we want to do it for Houston, right? So like maybe I don't want to play CJ Stroud. So like I go uncheck CJ Stroud. I say use at least 2. So then now I'm forcing in secondary stacks. Once I say this as a manual rule, right? So I go to save as manual. I go and look at the teams, and then maybe I don't want the rule for Indy, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. I just want it for Houston. So now the combination of unchecking CJ Stroud and having this rule to use at least 2 players from Houston that are a position player creates those secondary stacks for me, and then you know, doesn't allow for primary stacks to be built. Now say, you know, you only want to do this for a subset of your lineups. Well, that's fine. Still set it up this way, and then just go open a new build that doesn't have that rule set, build the rest of your lineups, and then use the favorite option to send both sets of lineups to the favorites, and then fill your contest from there. Is probably easiest practice in my opinion. All right, jumping over to the YouTube chat. M. Jackson, been on a bit of a losing streak in NBA, and I feel I need to refine my process. Where do you suggest someone start with reevaluating their process? All right, perfect question. So this is actually a good opportunity to plug our contest flashback. So Max and I did a video. If you go to the YouTube channel, How to Beat NBA DFS in 2023, you're going to find this building a slam dunk contest review process for an NBA season here. So this is Max and I walking through the contest flashback tool and using it for NBA specifically. So check out that video. We have another good video here. Review your results and study the pros. Let me just drop these in here. So, you know, using contest flashback to analyze your play is going to be one of the best things that you can do in this scenario. So I would highly recommend starting with these 2 videos and then seeing how you can branch it from there. But this will give you a better objective understanding of like, hey, how am I doing? All right. RB1 said, saw this question in Discord and had the same question. Okay, perfect. So I'm glad that question served the purpose for both of you there. So if you missed it, I did answer it. Just rewind a little bit. All right. Noah said, for NHL, is there a number of players from the same team? That is too many. I've seen people win with 5 or 6 from the same game, but that seems excessive on a 13-game slate like today. I don't want to restrict the Sims from too many from the same team, but it seems on a large slate like today, there would be more diversity. Yeah, I mean, this is something that, you know, SaberSim is going to answer for you, right? Like when you have this question, like, hey, you know, how much is too much? The best thing to do, in my opinion, is just go and run a build and then look at the stack pool exposures on the other side. So, for instance, if I was doing this, say I'm building 500 lineups for hockey for today. So I'm going to run my lineups. It's just going to show me, however many I'm playing. So the default is 20. You can change it to whatever number you're playing. But like, go and look at your pool exposure, go and look at, hey, yeah, maybe I'm playing, 1 out of 20, which is like 5%. But like, how often did this stack type show up across all the lineups that were built? And I think that's a really good measuring stick in general here. So when these lineups finish up, my lineups is 20, pool is 500. If I go to stack, I can see, okay, what is in my top 20? And it looks like there's only 1 5 stack. So I think the builder agrees with you that like, hey, you probably want to be a bit more spread out here. But I could sort by pool exposure. And then what I could see is that, our top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stacks as far as pool exposure goes are all 4 or less, right? We have 5 2s coming up 7% of the time. We have a naked 5 stacks, 3%. We have 6 stacks, about 3% here. So like if you were to come in here and, your 6 stacks were in, 25% of your lineup. So you had 5 of them, but there's only 14 in the entire pool, only about 2.7% total. I'd be like a little concerned. I'd probably want to manage my risk there a little bit. It just seems like that would be a lot of exposure for not a lot of exposure in all the lineups that were built. But like, that's not the case. But like, that is an example of something I would be looking to manage or walk back a little bit if SaberSim were to give me that. All right. Jumping back to the Discord here. Question says, where's the question? Using the DK NFL Sunday Milly Maker as an example. Oh my gosh, I didn't even shout out Chad. So hey guys, if you guys missed it, Chad won the Sunday Milly Maker on DraftKings with 5 lineups in the contest, took down $1 million prize. So huge shout out to Chad, man. Quite the New Year's Eve present. So hope he's doing good. And, we're really happy to have another Milly Maker winner here that makes 4 within like the last month here. So we've been on quite the heater and glad to see that people are using the tool and winning lots and lots of money. All right. So question says, using the DK NFL Sunday Milly Maker as an example, if I build 115 lineups and don't set any exposures or rules myself and just run a contest sim and filter by risk-adjusted ROI, the sim is always higher than if I make rules or exposures myself. This weekend, for example, my 150th lineup without any adjustments was at approximately 200% risk-adjusted ROI. Now, after I added some exposures on my own, like, for example, setting Justin Fields to min 30% as well as some other exposures, my 150th lineup was at 20%. Could it just be that the optimal strategy is just trusting the sims fully? Okay, good question. So let's go talk about this. Sorry. So let's just go back to the Saturday 2-game slate here that I had up. And let's see what we got. Let's get rid of this rule. And let's just build 500 lineups. So I'm just going to build 500 lineups. So what's happening here is that you are sorting the lineups from highest risk adjusted to lowest, right? So without any restrictions, it's going to give you the highest risk adjusted ROI lineups first. Now, when you start putting in exposure requests and those exposure requests are not met within the top lineups, what the builder does in this instance, right? Say we have 20 lineups and we have 500 in our pool. Well, maybe I set an exposure request and within my top 20, the builder cannot meet that exposure request. What the builder is going to do is go further down in your pool to find lineups that match what you have asked it to do. Well, since the lineups are sorted from high to low as far as risk-adjusted ROI, then yes, the lineups are going to start becoming lower and lower risk-adjusted ROI as the builder has to go and find the lineups that you're requesting it to, you're requesting to be in your portfolio. So what the key indicator here is what is the last number of your lineups, right? So like I have 20 lineups, no adjustments. My last lineup here is number 20. Well, like if I were to add in, min uniques here, and it looks like the max is 4. Well, like, look, now my last lineup went from 20 down to 250. Regardless of the sorting metric, this 250th ranked lineup is going to be lower ranked by the sorting metric than my 20th was. So that's all that's happening here. So you don't have to worry too much about that, in my opinion. Noah said that first lineup you have for NHL has a 3-man San Jose with 3 players under 3K, but that seems unlikely on this slate. I'm confused why Sim spit that out. I mean, I couldn't tell you, man, but like, hey, that is like the qualitative, that is the risk management that we suggest you do, right? You run builds, you spot check them, you look at what SaberSim is giving you, and then you make adjustments accordingly. And like, if that's not the lineup for you, like, great, man, go in, trash it. We're going to give you a new one. We're going to refill this to 20, and then you can go from there. But just the opportunity to come in here, like we always say, your best time is spent in the lineup review process after the lineups are built. Like, those are the adjustments that I think are important and that ultimately add value to your lineup portfolio overall. So like, if that's something you see, great. Like, I would spend more time doing that and, kind of okaying the lineups that you're actually playing rather than just letting them, sneak their way into your pool. And then you ultimately don't agree with the lineup format. So I think that's a great use of your time, all things considered. But all right, we are all caught up with questions in both the Discord and the YouTube chat. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always. And we will be right back here tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, for our next show. So until then, everybody, take care. Good luck. I'll see you guys. Thanks. Bye.